This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of North Pod. I'm going to jump straight into the podcast this week. I've got a guest on. He's from the Outer podcast, Chief. We had a long chat about North Melbourne season, list holes, potential pickups, AFLW. We talked about it all, so I'm going to jump straight into that. We had a long chat. I hope that you enjoy the chat and please check out his podcast From the Outer. Let's jump into the episode and I'll speak to you after the chat. All right. Well, I'm here with the Chief from the Outer podcast. Welcome aboard, Chief.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I try to listen every week, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat a bit of North Melbourne.
Yeah, it should be good. It's always good to come together with some North Melbourne fans, commiserate, talk about everything that's going wrong in the season. So hopefully we can make each other feel better about the season and our prospects for the future. We're going to walk our way through a bit of a season review and talk about some of the recent North Melbourne news. So I guess we'll start with the news and then we'll jump into a bit of season review talk. Just last week, we had Will Phil officially signed to a 1-year deal. We had Toby Pink activate a trigger so that he's on for another year, and we've had Robert Hansen Jr. and Finbar Maley get 1-year extensions, and then we've had Riley Hardiman and Will Dawson get extensions to the end of 2026. How'd you feel about those re-signings? Are any of those that you thought were a bit questionable, or are we playing it pretty conservatively and you're happy with those signings? What do you think?
Yeah, I think generally we're pretty happy with the signings. I'll add that Cam Zurhaar signed on again for another 5 years, which is really, really exciting. I think I would have been fairly devastated if he left. One of the few players that I'd be like absolutely gutted if he left, because I just like his persona, and whether he produces on field is a different thing. But I just like the guy around the club. But in terms of the recent signings, I think. The headline act there is probably Will Phil out of those guys. I think he was probably the one where there was a bit of consternation as to whether he would get a contract, whether he has a future in the North Melbourne midfield. And I personally think he does. I think he is a guy that we actually do need going forward. And we'll probably talk about this later in sort of our future, but Will Phil, I think will be that defensive midfielder that it will allow Sheasel and LDU and Wardlaw and these kinds of type of guys to go and do what they need to do without worrying so much about the defensive responsibilities. So I think he's vitally important. I also think that Pink, it's good for Pink to sign on again and trigger that extra year, because he's a hard worker. Whether he's in our future plans is probably a different conversation for another time. I think the reality is we probably, as we get better, we will upgrade, unfortunately. But and then the other ones, Will Dawson, I'm big fan of. Hardiman, I'm a big fan of. I think those guys have big futures at the club, and obviously the one that will be will have us all on the edge of our seats for the next, hopefully not too long, but it might be another 12 months, mate, which is LDU.
Yeah, that is a concern. I think we kind of expected that he wasn't going to sign until some point next year, but getting his signature is, I guess, the last of that core group that hasn't signed on long term, which I guess is probably it's definitely our biggest contract concern going into next year. We've signed away pretty much everyone else that we would like to have signed away. Just going back to Will Phil, I guess I love Will Phil as a person. I think he looks like a really hard worker, a potentially strong leader, and I do want to work out for him. I guess my concern, and I think the concern of a lot of other people, is how we actually fit him into the team, like who's coming out or what that looks like. Do you have any idea how we make that work next year, assuming that he's in good enough form to be playing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one issue with Will Phil is that at the moment he's relatively one-dimensional. He's not a guy who can go and play half back, and
Mm,
he's not really a guy who can play small forward. So you are a little bit hamstrung having him in the side. That said, I think the reality is Shields comes out, Will Phil takes his minutes.
hmm.
Um, and Will Phil acts as I said, that defensive midfielder slash run with player. And he's shown in the past he can accumulate as well. So I feel like he's an AFL level player. I feel like the last couple of years have been tainted for him given his glandular fever, maybe some confidence issues off the back of that,
Mm.
a change in system with Clarko. So, I'm willing to give him certainly this year to see how he goes, and then we kind of work it out. I think he's definitely part of the midfield rotation. We just can't have, and as much as people want this to be the case, we can't have just attacking midfielders in there. You,
Yeah, I
you, you
totally
can't, from
agree.
an accountability standpoint.
Yeah, and I guess like Georgie Wardlaw is, he's a ferocious tackler, but I do think he needs to be taught like defensive positioning and mindset. Like we know he'll chase hard and he has the want to defend, but he at the end of the day he's a see ball get ball kind of player. So I do think I agree with you. I think potentially it's Shields minutes. I guess that depends on if we are able to bring in another experienced midfielder potentially and what that looks like. We can talk about that in a minute as well, but. I tend to agree. I think Will Phillips doesn't have I guess, the flashiness of those other players, which is potentially what, sees him less respected, for want of a better word. Like he doesn't have the flashiness or the highlights of Sheasel and Wardlaw, but I agree. I think he's a great handballer. He's a good in and under player, and when he does kick, which is rare at the moment, I think he's actually a great kick inside 50. It's just that he's often not finding himself in the right position to do that. So look, I hope you're right. I hope he can build some form next year, and hopefully this time next year we're talking about signing him long term because he's found himself a great spot in the side. But yeah, I guess that remains to be seen. In terms of the other or the currently uncontracted players, so we've still got Blake Drury, Lazaro, Cooper Harvey, Curtis Taylor, Hamish Free, and Tyler Sellers without contracts for next year. Are you expecting any of those to pick up a contract for next year or maybe be rookied? What are your thoughts on those six players?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'll start from least likely to likely, so we can spend a little bit more time on kind of dissecting the guys that are probably more likely to stay. I would say Sellers, I think goes.
Yep.
I I actually worry about us signing Sellers to a contract. Maybe it was just they thought it was the list spot and they thought it would be a good chance to give someone, a chance to sort of help out Larky because obviously he was playing VFL for us last year and then we signed him. I think what I actually went to at least one of the games that he played and he looks completely lost.
Yeah.
He looked like he didn't have the fitness, which is fair enough for a guy coming from the VFL level. But again, absolutely no offense to Sellers, but when you've got guys like Pink and Tickle, these sort of guys in front of you, that doesn't bode well for staying on an AFL list. Because the reality is that the Pinks and the Teakles of the world, again, this is absolutely no disrespect to them, but as we improve as a team, those are probably the guys that start making way and become depth guys
Yeah.
for the more talented forwards that come through. We've also got, as you mentioned, Drury and Harvey. I kind of put
Hmm.
them in the similar boat. I mean, he's shown he's been serviceable at AFL level. He's obviously the elephant in the room is that he's Clarko's favorite player, probably.
Mm.
Probably sees a little bit of himself in Blake Drury. I feel as though Blake Drury, if he is to stay here, he'll be re-rookied.
Yep.
Potentially, if that's an option. Same with Harvey. There is obviously the family name with Harvey. Maybe that affects whether they keep him on board or not. Maybe he's re-rookied again. That guy's definitely got talent. I think
Yeah.
if you compare Drury and Harvey, Harvey's definitely got talent. He's got goal kicking talent. He's a small forward. He reminds me a lot of Waitman from the Bulldogs in terms of he can take a mark. He can
Mm.
do some spectacular things. Again, my worry is always if you're playing consistent football at the AFL level and the AFL team is going as badly as it is and we're crying out for small forwards, my concern is why are you not playing AFL at that level at that time? Is it a
Yeah.
matter of just you need to mature your body? Is it a matter of you don't understand the game plan? I don't know what it is because realistically, in the last year, the 2 teams or 3 teams, it's very easy to get a game at West Coast. Kangaroos, and Richmond, and they're not getting, and these guys aren't getting regular games. So I think that says a lot.
Just on Cooper, I think the thing for him is like he's on he feels that role the same as say Paul Curtis, where he's technically a small forward, like he's the size of a small forward, but he doesn't really play like one. Like you said, he's a great mark, but he doesn't necessarily like. I certainly haven't seen him with that forward or small forward craft hitting the front of packs regularly, which I think is it's more of a comment on our list. Like I think Cooper Harvey, that type of play is super important. But when you've got players like Cam Zurhaar and like Paul Curtis who are already playing that kind of medium marking role on the side, I just don't know how you get him in. Blake's a bit different.
Yeah.
I think he plays more like a small forward. It's just whether or not he actually has the AFL qualities, which I'm not sure that he does. But you make a great point. If you can't get a spot now in our side the last couple of years, there must be some serious deficiencies in your game, unfortunately.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, look, with Drury, I think he's obviously a hard worker. The problem is, and I say this all the time, and Lazaro fits into this mold as well. We'll move on to him. Is that you come through the ranks as a junior, and you're the best in your team, and you're playing 95% in the midfield. So all of your skill set, your positioning, your idea of the game plan comes from being a midfielder, and the top 1% of 1% talent at the Coates League level or VFL level. You go into an AFL system and you're now 36th on the depth chart. The only way you're going to get a game is to play small forward. They don't have the skill set. They haven't developed the skill set from under 18s to be able to play small forward. Like a Drury is a great example of that. He's learning the game at AFL level to be a small forward. He's not a small forward, actually. He's a midfielder. And the same thing with Lazaro. Lazaro came in playing small forward under Noble, and people kind of have a go at him. He doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. It's because Charlie Lazaro is a midfielder.
Yep.
And and moving on to him, I'm a really big fan of him. And I think similar to Will Phillips, he's getting squeezed out because the role that he plays is really the role that Powell and Sheasel plays, which is this kind of forward of centre, goal-kicking midfielder role, but there's no room for him. And so if he's to play in the side, generally he plays as a small forward, and he doesn't do that well because that's not a natural game for him. So I personally think that, unfortunately, Lazaro, I think he's one of these players that goes to a St Kilda or goes to a Geelong or goes interstate and finds his feet and becomes a very, very serviceable AFL player.
Mm-hmm.
Like a Mason Wood.
Yeah. I think Mason Wood showed a little bit more than Lazaro has at AFL level, but I could totally see that happening for sure, where it's like he finds a role somewhere else, in a side that doesn't have. I mean, sometimes we get a bit carried away with our side. We are sitting 17th, but I think we have a stacked young midfield, like it's a developing midfield, and there's plenty of players that are coming through there, and he's certainly behind. So whilst I'm not about to say that we currently have an elite midfield, I think we've got the bare bones of one that could be in the future. So I think it's fair to say that he's on the outer of that pecking order and could find more opportunities elsewhere for sure.
But I do think I personally think, depending on who you want to bring in, the amount of draft picks and the amount of free agents, that he maybe gets that 43rd or 44th list spot.
Yep.
Because he becomes a depth player for the midfield. And a Powell gets injured or a Simpkin gets injured again, Lazaro comes in and can play that role. And I think he can play that role really well. Curtis Taylor's a really interesting one. Clearly the dude can play. I think everybody understands that he's a very good player at the AFL level potentially. But again, you mentioned these names before. There are three of them: Zurhaar, Curtis, and Eddie Ford.
Yep.
Are all medium-sized forwards. They're all the players that Curtis Taylor, the spots that Curtis Taylor would want to play. And unless Curtis Taylor, they decide to change position for him to become like a winger or something of this nature, he's probably the best talent-wise, but I don't know whether he gets in the team.
Yeah, I loved him. I reckon it was a 2020 year, maybe. I certainly remember watching him on the couch during COVID and going, gee, this guy's got talent. Like, we've found one. That was such a dire time, and I thought, great, we've at least got one that we can look to. And he hasn't been able to find that role in the side the last couple of years. Clearly can take a great mark. I think he's actually not a bad kick. But for whatever reason, has fallen down the pecking order. I mean, potentially the spot on the wing. I don't know that Dylan Stephens has shot the lights out. The problem is, though, you've got Dylan Stephens contracted for several more years. So I think you're more likely to try and make that work as opposed to Curtis Taylor, who's out of contract. And you'd be making that role work for him as opposed to Dylan Stephens, who is a wingman. So, yeah, I tend to agree.
Yeah,
I think Curtis is probably on the way out. And who knows, like you mentioned before, could go elsewhere and make a career for himself if he could turn it around.
for sure. I can definitely see him going to I mean, he could go to a Richmond. I think Richmond could definitely use Curtis Taylor. I think this seems wacky, but I think Geelong could use Curtis Taylor. Like they've got very little. They don't actually have that much midfield depth. It's obviously we're in the wake of them absolutely spanking Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, but they make it work. But I think they would want to add to that depth. And again, he could be a role player for them.
And Hamish Free, do we need to spend too much time on him? Do you feel like he's on the way out?
Probably. I think it's look. I think he's more of a medical kind of retirement type position.
Yeah.
And I don't want to retire the guy because I have heard many stories about this guy from WA because he's from WA and he's just a huge lump of a lad. And some of the things that he does as a ruckman, people just shake their head. He was playing waffle. I think that's where we got him from, but he's very much in that sort of yeah, it's more like that Max Gorn type. Obviously not as good as him, but Max Gorn type. But he's unless X gets injured, he's probably not going to get a gig. And we've got other guys in front of him. You look at Teakle is there. We've obviously got Goad, who we picked up last year, who's going to be, again, there's big raps on him as an athlete. He's a huge dude. He's as big, if not slightly taller than Max Gorn. He can move really, really well. He's obviously super raw. So I think that's what they're thinking and kind of frees the one to make way, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think you've got to have that ruckman on your list that's really there as an absolute break glass in case emergency. I guess that's been him the last couple of years. I tend to agree. I think with the performance of Big X this year, no one's going past him as primary ruck for several years, unless the unthinkable happens and he gets a major injury. So I think, let's not waste a list spot, so to speak. We've got Taylor Goad there, and we've got players that could fill that role in the meantime until Taylor Goad's ready if things go wrong, I think. So yeah, I think that's a great point. I guess we'll move on to our season review. We've just got a couple of, talking points from across the year. It'll be interesting, Chief, to get your perspective, given obviously this is your first time on the podcast. So I've been banging on about a lot of the same things all year. You might have some different opinions or some different thoughts on some of these points. So I will start with the positives, which is unusual for my podcast. I usually like to start with the negatives, but
I have noticed that, mate.
I've
noticed you start, and then we build into the positives as we go along.
Yeah. We just try and get. I like to say it's like getting your vegetables out of the way. I'm not a vegetable eater, so you get the vegetables out of the way, and then you can enjoy your dinner. That's the apply the same philosophy to the podcast. What positives can you draw from the season? What are the big things that we can look at as North fans and go, all right, well, that at least we've got that.
Well, to the outside observer, we would have very few positives this year, and I can completely acknowledge that. But if you've ever listened to the podcasts, from the outer that I do with a friend of mine, I'm a very glass half full person. I'm always sticking to the positives,
and I think we have to be as North fans at the moment, don't we?
Definitely, 100%. That's a great point. And so I've got a few here. I think we can finally see that we're trying to establish a game style, a brand of football and ethos with which we can take the game forward with our list. And I think that's something that quite clearly under Noble we didn't see. We didn't see much of it last year because obviously Clarko was only there for basically half a season, and then kind of Ratton was running. I feel like Ratton was kind of running his own race there. So it's good to see a game style emerge when we play well, which is this kind of high pressure, dominate the midfield, and we can transition it quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a positive because that we can only build on that over the off season. Then hopefully when it clicks, we will see quite a quick turnaround. The other thing in that is really, and you mentioned it before, like we don't want to get too carried away with our midfield. We definitely don't. But particularly the second half of the year, our midfield was quite dominant, to be honest. In terms of numbers, our midfield, usually we won the clearances, I think, pretty much every week. We all started to win tackle counts We started to win possession counts. These are all really, really positive things. And we're starting to get on top in the midfield. Even against really quite seasoned teams like Collingwood. West Coast is not quite as seasoned, but you get the idea. We're actually playing quite well. Melbourne is a good example. Like Melbourne is a
Yep.
bit more of a seasoned midfield, and we've had a very good game against them, particularly in the second half. So we started to dominate. In fact, it got me quite frustrated towards the end of the season when I look at the numbers and I'm going, Sheasel's had 35, Powell's had 28 and kicked 2 goals, LDU's had 30, X has had 10 clearances and 12 tackles and 35 hitouts. What are we doing wrong?
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah, I
incredibly
do.
frustrating.
I think a lot of that. I mean, I certainly know. I think every week we looked at the efficiency inside 50, and you just go, we're absolutely butchering it. And there's a combination between the mids not connecting well with the forwards and our forwards just exerting virtually no pressure on the ball when it got in there. So, yeah, I think you're right. Like there were elements of that game plan. We looked great in transition when we were up and about. When we played Collingwood that first half, and we just thought, how exciting is this? Like we're creating pressure, which is creating a turnover, and then we're actually able to convert that turnover to an effective inside 50. It's just that consistency, I guess, that we didn't necessarily have across a match, and certainly across the season. That the first half of the season was rough watching. In terms of like players, are there any players that you thought were super standouts? I mean, we know the major names, but feel free to roll them off if that suits.
Yeah, I think so. X obviously huge.
Yep.
Basic, almost all Australian ruckman, very close. A lot of people argue with me about, a lot of North fans say it was definitely all Australian ruckman, but that's something for another time. Thought Powell had a really good year.
Hmm.
This was a turning point year for Powell. I think Powell understands that he can be a very, very good AFL player now, and he's starting to get really good consistency through his season. I don't think in our midfield he's going to be one of the lesser lights because he's not as well known. He probably doesn't do as flashier things as like an LDU or a Sheasel or as hard as Water, but he's your fourth midfielder who's going to be a jet,
And
and
every
he's going to be
midfield
hard to
needs
match
that,
up
right?
opposite.
Like you can't have a
100%.
midfield full of absolute stars. Like I think of the only real midfield from the past, or from my memory, where you just stacked that I can think of is either that Brisbane triple, and you probably go down to like Nigel Lappin, who was the fourth best, and was still an absolute jet. But and maybe you could talk about some of those Geelong teams, but like invariably you're going to have some stars, and you're going to have those role players that are they're doing their part so the stars can shine, I guess. And I think I said on the podcast at one point I didn't realize that Tommy Powell had played every game for the year, which I guess just sort of crept up on me. He's been that player that's been in and out of the side in previous seasons, but you're right. He really cemented his spot. I thought his first half was a bit stronger than his second half, but he definitely found his footing and played a consistent role, which was fantastic.
And he's quite clearly like slotting into a role that the
Yeah.
coaching panel have for him. He plays a little bit off half forward. He swaps with Simkin quite a lot, and he kicks goals. Like so, thought he was great at the start of the season. We were really thinking. I was thinking, it's really who's going to kind of break out this year. Is it going to be Powell, or is it going to be Will Phillips, or is it going to be both? Inevitable comparisons between the two because it's the same draft year. Powell was 14 or 13 or something. And then obviously Will Phil was 3. So they're always going to be compared to each other. And Powell's obviously gone ahead of Will Phil, which to me was a bit surprising. Another player that I don't think maybe gets as many plaudits as he should is Paul Curtis. Very, very flashy player, obviously. We know that. Maybe people probably don't find him that consistent, and that's fair enough. But I think he was more consistent, and he was obviously our second highest goal kicker as well. So he has shown that he can be a really good, again, another really good player in this league. And it'll be interesting. We'll chat maybe later on about what the structure of the forward line looks like, given the recent meta of AFL teams and how they choose to have talls and smalls and so forth. But I thought Curtis was really, really good. I also think Curtis will be in a team that is better. He'll be a star.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's. We don't really need to talk about him. We can if you want, but
Well, I think
as I always like talking about him.
what's possibly underrated about him is that, sure, he backed up, possibly the best rookie season ever. with an amazing second season. But he did it by, for most of this season, playing a different role to last year. And I remember when he made the switch from being that defender to being sort of a front half or midfield player, there was maybe 2 games there where I thought, oh, she's maybe he's struggling with this adjustment. He's not dominating like he had been. And then after that, it was just like nothing had ever happened. He was playing amazing midfield front half minutes. So you're right. It's just so easy to take him for granted, but he's just an absolute jet. Like what? I mean, I don't think he can have a steal at the top of the draft, but he's a steal. Like he's such a good player.
Sometimes I wonder what we did. I say to my mate Ron on From the Adder, we go, what did North do to deserve Harry Sheasel?
Yeah, he's not a very North Melbourne player, is he?
No, he's not. And somehow we got him. He's like, this is the guy that should go to Collingwood. He should go to Richmond. Like he would be so big there, and he's so invested obviously in North, and he speaks very well, obviously that helps. His head's screwed on the right way. Yeah, we just love him. I think you're right. His back half of the year was amazing. He forward of center, he was really dynamic, and he's just so clean. I think that's what gets me. The cleanliness of his hands and all the work that he does. He's never flustered. I guess the next thing for him to do is probably kicks a few more goals. If I was to have any criticism of his game, but look, if he has the exact same season next season, I'll be clapping my hands as well. Because I think if he has the same season again, he makes all Australian team. Because as we know,
yeah.
all Australians, you've got to play well for about 5 years in a row to get into the team for 1 year. So, Comben was fantastic this year in some ways. The continuity was great, and he proved that he can be a relatively reliable key position player, without being injured, which is great. Look, controversially, if you look at the statistics, he is not a very good defender.
Mm-hmm.
He loses a lot of one-on-ones.
He does.
I think he's got the number one rate for losing one-on-ones in the comp. It's like 35 or 40%, which is, if you look at Jacob Wiedering, it's like 5%. Yep. So and I know we're comparing him to the best in the league, but you get the point. I think the key for Comben is if we are to play him back, which is what the general consensus is going to be, I think he is the intercept defender. He's not a one-on-one.
Yep.
Jacob Wiedering, he's more of a James Sicily type player.
Do you think, like, I tend to agree, I think he will play defense short term. Do you think long term he's a forward for us though, or where do you see him? Like longer term, I guess.
Look, it's incredibly difficult. I think there's a lot of things that we need that'll work themselves out. I wonder whether, obviously, Will Dawson is a guy who's going to come up and maybe play centre half back in the future. And if we've got, that's in the next 2 or 3 years, and then if we've got Cole Logue and maybe a Will Dawson, then we can afford to send Comben forward. What we do know is it's much harder to find a key forward than it is a key back.
Yes.
It's virtually impossible to find, a key forward that's going to kick 40 plus goals. And, if you get one, they're like rare as hen's teeth, and they're going to be 2 first-round draft picks, probably, for 3. So it's very difficult to find. So I think what Clarko has in mind is to keep him as a swing man. So have him there, and then, send him down if we need to, and sort of as a matchup based thing. I'll get into it now, I guess, with the game plan. I think we maybe need to look at the way that Hawthorn are going about it, which is they don't have dominant tall forwards.
No, they don't, but they've got a lot of small pressure forwards, don't they? Which they do have a dearth of on our list. Like we have players that are smaller, but they don't necessarily play that smaller role. I guess we saw Richmond have a lot of success with some smalls in their forward line as well. They had that really just get the ball forward mentality, and then they brought in Tom Lynch, which changed things a little bit. But even so, they were still playing Lynch, Rewalt, and then a lot of smalls around him. So yeah, I don't know. Do you feel like we need to change the game plan to suit our list a little bit?
Not necessarily, but I guess the point is that we are quite we're quite obsessed as a fan base about finding the guy to help Larky.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, but my question is, do we need that person if we can get production from Curtis, Ford, and particularly Cam Zurhaar? Like if those players can kick 30 goals close to 30 goals a year. Like Curtis has shown that he can do that. Zerha can definitely do that. And then Wulaki kicks 40 to 60. Suddenly we've got a forward line that is actually kicking quite high scores. So what I guess I'm saying is that do we need a guy who can kick 40? Maybe not. Maybe we can get away with a Teakle or a CCJ to be the cannon fodder to create, contests down the line and take a little bit of the pressure off Nick so he can stay closer to goal. But do we sell the farm for it? Maybe not. I feel like if we can definitely get like cement, Comben as that intercept defender and lock down, and then Archer's obviously another guy that's progressed really well and can stay on the small backs. We can get some really like good continuity with the game plan that way. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think it's you're right. Like it's hard to know which way to go. I think when Teakle came into the side, that sort of coincided with us playing Pink as a forward in the second half of the year at times as well. I think Larky played better, but it's more around, well, do you think as a whole the forward line functioned better? Because I guess that's what you're speaking to. Like, it's not about making sure that Nick's going to kick 80 goals. It's about making sure that we're going to kick a winning score. So I think having another tool in there's definitely helped Larky's game, but you could probably argue about whether or not it helped our game overall. We certainly played better in the second half of the year, but that's not, solely down to plonking Brent Tinkle in the forward line. It's just a part of it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the production of Teakle and Pink, like I don't know how many goals. I mean, if they kicked more
Like a
than
goal a game,
together
maybe.
combined, have they kicked more than 10 goals this entire year together? Like I don't think they have. So
Yeah.
it's not for them. It's not about production. It's about the structural importance of having a second or third tall in there. Again, like, yeah, would I like Jeremy Cameron? Yeah, of course I would. But
Yeah.
short of
Anyone
that,
would make that work, wouldn't they?
yeah, exactly. Just a few extra positives. We'll just run through these really quickly. We've got stability at the club. This
Mhm.
is positive. We've got stability in terms of administration and leadership. We've got stability in terms of the playing group with guys signing on. I think that's really, really positive. If you look at what's happened to Melbourne, we'd rather be this side of it than their side of it. The other thing, there's a couple of other things here. It seems like the club culture is really like positive.
Mhm.
I have between you and I and the many listeners of North Pod, I have heard whispers from certain people who are at the club who say, culturally compared to other clubs, it's a way better place to work.
Mhm.
Now, whether that franks into a winning culture is a
Yeah.
completely different argument, and that may be something that is an issue. But and the final thing is, our best players are young. Our best
Yeah,
players
that's a
are
good point.
22. Like, and if you compare that to Richmond, if you compare that to West Coast, if you compare that to a few other clubs that are in that sort of middling range, maybe even St Kilda to a lesser extent, their players are a little bit older. West Coast is a great example. Their older players are really a crutch for that whole team. McGovern and Barras
Yo.
and Kelly and all these guys. Our best players are 22 and under.
Yep.
With the exception of Larky and X, who are only 25 and 24 or whatever. I think that's really, really positive. And if you compare, I was having a look at some statistics actually before I came on the podcast, and the age demographics are incredibly interesting. One of which is we've got way less players than other clubs in the 50 to 99 games.
Hmm.
Like if you compare us to Sydney, we've got like 7 or 8 less players. And then
Yep.
we've got way less players in obviously the 200 plus bracket. So there's these massive gaps in our list,
Yeah. Yep.
which shows where we are in the window, basically. So I think that's a real positive.
Yeah, and I think back to the pandemic years, and for the most part, we had a really aging list where our players that were playing best week to week tended to be those older players, and we're kind of sitting there going, "Gee, like what future do we have?" Because whilst we had youth on the list at that point coming through, it wasn't they weren't necessarily, they weren't finding themselves in the best most weeks. It was what's Jack Zeeble done for us today? What's Ben Brown done for us? What's Ben Cunnington done for us? Those are the kind of conversations we were having. Robbie Tarrant even at that point. So it was, that was the concern. And I think that probably speaks to where, teams like Richmond and West Coast are at in their development. Like, whilst it might feel like we're a long way off it yet, at least we're through, fingers crossed, touch wood, that part of the development where you're left with these really good players, or a handful of really good players and a handful of young players that aren't up to it. I hope we're through that part anyway.
Look, let's be honest. I think we are, but look, you never know. We've been a football follower for too long to understand that you never know what's going to happen next season as much as you can hope.
No, I mean, who
You never
picked
know.
Hawthorn finishing, in the top six, so to speak?
This is crazy. Hawthorn picked Hawthorn.
I
If
know.
you and the reason I say that is because and this goes into our recruiting. They recruited for needs, and they thought they were close. They got Chol and
Hmm.
they got a few other Meek and a few other of these guys that looked like middling players, but they've become gun players in the right
I know,
environment.
and
That's what we need to do.
it goes the other direction, and they look silly. It does pay to back yourself as a club, I think. Unfortunately, because
Sure.
I hate Hawthorn. Um,
You
I'm
and me
gonna.
both.
So we've reveled in what went right in our 3-win season where we finished 17th. In terms of what went wrong, I feel like we could probably talk forever. I think for me personally, the season started awfully, losing Josh Goder and CCJ to Achilles injuries for different reasons. I mean, CCJ was more around, can he make it as a player, and Josh Goder was more around, we think he's going to be a great player. It'd be great to get a full season into him. So, that was not an ideal way to start the season. Where did you see our deficiency or things start going wrong for us this year?
Again, it's a laundry list. It's a long laundry list, unfortunately. I think it's quite clear that early in the season there was a big disconnect between kind of how we wanted to play and what the players were putting out there. There was a lot of
What they were
disconnect
capable of,
between the
even.
players themselves. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, for sure. And then maybe potentially, I mean, I consume quite a lot of media from the club. Like, I'll listen to most of Clarko's presses unless we've had an absolutely stinking loss. But one thing that he pointed out is halfway through the season, they really simplified the game plan.
Hmm.
And quite clearly, we need to get back to that DNA, and that's which is that contested ball, trying to dominate the midfield and then move it quickly through the middle. And we weren't doing that early on, so that was clearly a disconnect between the coaching panel, the players, and then what we need to do. Us as fans, like, we can get a bit kind of pent up in the X's and O's of football, and getting a player. Why isn't this player playing? Why isn't that player playing? Why can't we get Parker? Why can't we get someone else? The reality is that I think all I want is effort every single week, like as hard an effort as they can give every single week. And I think early in the season we just weren't seeing that.
No, I think you're spot on. I think that was a lot of the frustration was where we're not seeing reward for effort, but we're also not seeing consistent effort from enough players, I guess. And some of those players that you look at and you go, you had an okay year last year and you seem to be resting on your laurels a bit. Like, I don't know what Bailey Scott was doing in the first part of the year, if it was an issue around, trying to play a slightly different role off half back, or what was going on there. But, a player like him who's had two really solid years and just didn't seem to be finding the footy at all in the first part of the year was strange to me. But I totally agree. I think all you want as a fan, or all you can expect, is 100% effort, because they can't go out there and be something that they're not.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, you're an AFL footballer, this is your job. You're paid to give 100% effort the whole time, and you're incumbent. I don't think they owe the fans much, but they owe the fans effort,
Yep.
and that's what we didn't see early in the season. But then when it came, you sort of saw the stark difference between how I played in the first part of the year versus the second part of the year. I think you mentioned one really good word, which is consistency. Not only consistency week to week, but quarter to quarter, 10-minute period to 10-minute period,
Mm,
early in the season, we just had no consistency. We'd play a good 10 minutes here and then we'd switch off. We'd play a good quarter here and then switch off. I remember the first half against Frio was a great example of that. We played really great footy, probably the best footy of the first half of the year. And we were up by 5 goals against Frio at Marvel. And then we just fell away. The effort went away. It seemed like we were completely deflated. So that's something that we improved in the back half of the year. But let's be honest, the last two games really left a bad, sour taste in everybody's mouth because we thought we'd progressed past that. And interestingly enough, I don't think last year we were done by 100 in one single time. And this year, I don't think we definitely weren't up until these last two games where we just fell away completely, which is a bit of a
Yeah,
that's a negative in itself.
it is. I think, we kind of prided ourselves last year on those honourable losses where, we'd stay in the game until 3/4 time ish, and then we'd fall away. And we I don't think we necessarily had as much of that this year because the first half of the season we were so poor we were out of games a lot earlier. But the second half of the year we had a lot of those honourable losses. You're right, it really fell away. It's so hard, I guess, as a fan. I think as a player, you can go, well, we've just got 2 weeks left. We just have to get through whatever happens, happens. As fans, it's a little bit different because it is, we've been in this situation for 5, 6, 7 years. And to feel like we're on the up and then to be brought crashing back down to earth so hard in those last 2 weeks, it's hard to swallow. Like logically, I totally understand it from a logic point of view. It makes sense. It's the end of a long year. The way that West Coast game ended was a heartbreaker. So you can see the come down, but it was really frustrating, really deflating, I guess, in terms of a way to end your season when compared with the win against the Gold Coast last year, which sure has its pros and cons, but you'd much prefer to be winning footy games than losing them, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think also we touched on it before. Like quite clearly, we're not converting our weight of possession into both inside 50s. So again, went to the stats. If you compare our inside 50s to like we're the lowest in the league in the low 40s per game, you're just not winning a lot of games with 42 inside 50s. Like you're just not. Compare that to Sydney, who are sort of mid to high 50s. That's just more opportunities to score. It's more opportunities. Like if you're having, say, let's say for argument's sake, 10 more times in the forward 50, 10 more opportunities to score per game every week, you're up against it. With our defense, particularly early in the season, that just did not work very well. So we just need to work on somehow franking our level of possession both into inside 50s, yes, but also quality inside 50s, as you pointed out, because our efficiency was low. So when you have low inside 50s and your efficiency is low, like it's like the worst. It's double trouble, really, isn't
It,
it?
it is,
The
and that
worst
was
possible scenario.
that's exactly what happened in those last 2 games of the year. We didn't see the ball inside 50 at all, and when it did go in, it was shocking. So we've definitely got a stamp. We can't have those two things happening at once. I guess just touching on the defense, do you feel like in some ways it's a very experienced area of the ground, and that's really only because we've got Aiden Core and Luke McDonald down there. Do you feel like we're any closer to finding sort of our medium to long term defensive options after this year?
I actually think, particularly in the second half of the year, the guys stood up really well. I think there was weight of numbers there. Obviously, as I said, we're conceding basically every week or every second week, we're conceding 60 plus inside 50s. So in that sense, I think the combination of core, I mean, McDonald gets a lot of heat, but I actually think he does a good job for what he's meant to do, which
Hmm.
is he's meant to stop and give leadership and direction. And then if you add into that Archer, who obviously was a breakout player in our backline this year,
Yes.
and then sort of one of sort of Fisher, or sort of it'll be Hardiman in the future potentially. Just these distributors. I think it's not the worst in the world. I think if you add Logue into there, I mean, Logue's had a horrific run with injury the last year and a half. Once Logue's in there and we get some stability, I think it'll be very, very a very, very good backline. That's my opinion. Um, let's be honest though, backlines are only as good as your structure.
Yes.
I know people like we get heavily beaten, and people will go, "Well, look, our defense sucks." Well, I don't think it's at the feet of Aiden Core or Luke McDonald or Jackson Archer or Logue when our defensive structure fails them so miserably every week. And again, I don't want to. I hate bring the Hawks up. Hawks have a defense, apart with the exception of Sicily, they don't have a name defense. Like there's no one in that back line apart from Sicily who you would say, oh yeah, this guy's in the top 20 defenders in the league. But they do it through structure, and they make sure that the ball coming in is dirty, and they make sure that preventing the passing lanes, and they make sure that they take the right positioning, and like all of these things contribute to a really effective back six. And I think once they get that pressure on the ball and all that, everything that comes with defensive structure, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. I think that the reality is that one thing that I was always worried about is having a player that would look after the small forward, the dangerous small forward, the
Yeah.
Charlie Camerons, the Bobby Hills, Waitman to a certain extent. And Jackson Archer stepped up to be that player. So that's really, really exciting. We need an intercept defender. I think Comben is that intercept defender. And then we need two lockdowns. And Core, for everybody, like I am a big Aiden Core fan, actually, because I think he gets the hardest assignment every week. He gets your Jesse Hogans, your Kernos, your Joe Danaher's. That sucks. It's the
Yeah.
worst job in football because the balls, like you're getting 70 inside 50s against you, against these guys, they're going to kick goals. And I think Aiden Core has done a great job, actually, given what his strengths are, which is his speed. Phil Davis talked about Aiden Core and his spot in our backline, and he just basically said Aiden Core at the GWS was a third tall defender. He wasn't a key defender, really. He plays on a guy like Langford, for example, from Essendon. And he's had to step up, and it's taken him a little bit of time. But I think in back half of the year, he showed that he can do that job quite effectively. And you chuck Logan in there, who's a bigger body, a thicker guy, who will take the monsters a little bit more. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I think any tall or defender in general is made to look silly in our defensive structures at some point in the game. I think the way that we find ways to turn it over at halfback and put our deepest defenders under immense pressure, yeah, it makes them look a lot worse than they are, just because of the way the ball's coming in. And I think Aiden Core is often, as the sort of last line of defense, is often made to look bad or like he's out of position when in reality, he's copying what's happened further up the ground. The other thing that I think probably it's harder to quantify, but when you're playing in a side that, all of these negative things are happening so often, it would be really hard to trust the players around you to do exactly what they need to do because you just haven't seen that consistently and you haven't been playing in a structure or in a team where those structures are in place. Like, the media talks a lot about May and Lever and the way they've been able to work together with someone like Tom McDonald. And that's because they all kind of trust each other. Like May and Lever can't come off unless they trust the players around them to cover them. And we don't have that trust amongst our players because of what we've looked like for the past couple of years. It's nothing to do with the individual players themselves. It's just that you've got to have that continuity and consistency. So I hope that with more time and some better defensive structures up the ground, we can get a bit more consistency through that area of the ground. But you're right, like it's pretty hard to judge our defense as a unit based on what the rest of the team dishes up at the moment. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, and I think one buzzword at the moment through the AFL is connection, and what they mean by a connection is exactly what you're talking about: cohesiveness, the ability to understand what your teammates are going to do, become predictable to them without even needing to communicate that. And that connection piece is born out over reps and reps and reps and reps over years and years and years, and that's why you see teams coming up together and doing really well. May, Lever, Salem, McDonald, these guys come up together and they've had so many reps together. They, as you say, they're very attuned to what the other person's going to do. McGovern and Barras are probably the greatest example. Another great example of that
Yeah.
is that they're so in tune that they know when they need to leave. This is the connection that we need to develop as a football team over the next. Well, it's just a continuing project is to continue to build that connection, and we're doing it slowly. But again, it's going to take. Unfortunately, it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, nothing comes fast, unfortunately. I guess speaking to that, what do you think excites you about the list? I guess we've talked about that young midfield. We've talked about a couple of those core players that we know are going to be there, like your Nick Larkeys and your Paul Curtises. Are there any other, I guess, elements of the list that do excite you that get you going to the footy to watch North Melbourne every week?
Yeah, clearly the young, potentially dominant midfield is one. I think as that connection builds in the midfield, we have a quartet in there that each of them brings such different skill sets, and um, hopefully those things complement each other. And I think that can be super exciting in the future. You look at LDU, who's super explosive. He's got that step. He explodes from contest. You've got the absolute silk of Sheasel, and then you've just got a hard head in George, who they're all very very different. And I think that's really really exciting. I think also a guy who hasn't played stacks of football this year, and I think a lot of it comes down to, if we had less mid-sized forwards, potentially Dersma would play more. But I think there's potential for Dersma to be the best of that crop. Like he's that level of skilled.
Be
He's
cool.
such a good kick. He's so explosive overhead. I think what he becomes in the future is like what we wanted Taron Thomas to be, which is a guy
Okay.
who forwards from forward of center gets sort of 15 to 20 touches a game, has the ability to kick six, but also has the ability to set up a lot of goals. Gets an engine that can run through the midfield or for fits and starts. He's going to be like I really genuinely think from a talent perspective, he's the one that is just has massive X factor, and I'm very very excited about what he can do in the future. He's going to be someone to watch for sure.
Yeah, I guess we saw little bits of that through the season. He had a couple of games where he was able to hit the scoreboard, and he took that massive grab late in the year. He's got a lot of talent, so I agree. I think the Taron Thomas comparison's interesting. I definitely see Jesma more forward than Taz. I mean, when Taz was at his best, he was through the midfield and then doing a little bit of damage forward, but it's also, like a lot of that I think was based on what the structure of the team looked like at that point. So yeah, it's an interesting comparison. I think we heard it in his draft year that he was that sort of half forward that can go into the midfield. We've just been a bit, I don't know, personally, I've been a bit scarred because we hear that's what Cam Zerha is going to do every year, and then he just mostly plays forward. I don't know what the what the situation there is with his marketing team. I don't know who's pushing that agenda, but there's some kind of misconnection there because every year he's going to be an absolute jet in the midfield, and then he ends up starting at about 3 centre bounces. I hope that
He's a
Dersma
poor
can do
man's
more of
Jake
it.
Stringer.
He is. He is.
Cam Zerha is a poor man's Jake Stringer because, and look, people will hate me saying this. I love Cam Zerha; he's one of my favorite players. Stringer actually, like, as much as I dislike Stringer as a person, he produces. He actually produces, and he
Yep.
does go through the midfield, and he does give the team quite a lift. Like if Cam can if Cam can kick 40 goals next year, which I think is his, definitely can do that. Like hats off.
Yeah.
We'll be up and about, and we'll move up the ladder for sure. As I said, yeah, I think let's hope that Dersma and Hardiman is another one. I think everybody kind of Hardiman's going to be the natural replacement for McDonald. I think
Yep.
going forward, I actually think that he's another one that has quite good leadership capabilities. I think he's great overhead that we haven't seen. He's very explosive, and he's a very good kick on his left. So he's a guy that I hope will see more minutes next year. We haven't seen much of the talls that we got from the last draft. Will Dawson a little bit, but he had that shoulder injury. And then Goad, we haven't heard anything from Goad.
No, I
Like
don't
I've not
know.
seen anything.
He doesn't also at this stage doesn't appear to be doing much at VFL level either. And I guess it's a bit of the old. You just have to hope that trust that we've drafted him based on that potential once his body feels out. I guess because you're right. We saw a bit of Dawson at least. Although we seem to be experimenting with him forward as well. I really did. I don't know what we're doing with him at the end of the year. It was a bit bit odd, but you're right. The talls take longer, don't they? So I guess we hope that we've got those picks right last year, but invariably you don't find that out until 3 or 4 or 5 years down the track. I mean, Tristan Sherry's taken how long to become a breakout star? You know, the talls just take a long time.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and I think also necessity breeds that a little bit. And this is the hard part. I think this is a completely different topic, but you need to, when you're in this situation, you need to balance out game time for the youngsters, which gives them experience,
Hmm.
versus being competitive by bringing in. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but bringing in an experienced head who might play a few more minutes, takes some minutes away from someone else, but it does that help the long term progression? That's something that you got to kind of weigh up.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes there's I guess debate about that in terms of fans because if you're not going well, I think the fans tend to just go, well, let's just play every kid we've got. And there's definitely damage or risks that come with that, I think, because all of a sudden you go from being nearly competitive to being so far from competitive that it's actually, damaging to that group of young players. So you do have to be careful with that. I definitely do think we need to pick up an experienced player this off season, but I guess it's around, like we always say, it's all well and good for the fans to say we need to go and get this player, but they have to come. There's a lot of things that have to fall into place. It's not as simple as just saying let's go get X player. I guess speaking on that, like, what do you think? What are the holes in the list that you see that needs addressing, I guess, as soon as possible? What could we do in the next couple of draft and trade periods, do you think, to bump us up the ladder as fast as possible?
Yeah, I think the first thing is what we talked about it, just alluded to it, is the older head in the midfield. Like we've been linked with Viney. That fell over. Obviously, we're being linked with Parker. We'll see what happens there.
Do you think
Wines
Parker's a
seems like
realistic option
Wines.
for us?
Here's the thing. This is what I've noticed in the last 2 years. If you're like me and you listen to a little bit of SEN, you will get into a situation where you will listen to these uh, these reporters, these AFL reporters, the news hounds, and they'll say, "I have it on good authority that this is happening." That Parker's management is talking to North, that Viney is, unhappy with Melbourne. He wants to go to North. I think the vast majority of it is being generated by the players' manager.
Hmm.
And they're out there talking to a Sam Edmund or a Tom Morris and saying, this is what we're doing. When in reality, it's what I would describe as market manipulation.
Yep.
Basically, it's them putting pressure on another club. In the case of Viney, it was Melbourne. In the case of Parker, it's Sydney, to then offer up a better contract at better terms, more years. They're just using Kangaroos as a bit of a bargaining chip. And as we know, we've heard about the war chest for a very, very long time.
Hmm.
I'm yet to see it.
Well, I don't know what you're talking
Show
about,
me the
mate. We
war
we
chest.
we spent it on Jared Polek. That went really well for us. Um,
He was the highest paid player at Oak Park or wherever he went to. He was getting 600 grand a year playing for Noble Park,
yeah,
and he's not even playing for us, which just goes to show you. But I think I'm always kind of reluctant to get really deep into this. Like, did I want Viney? I actually didn't want Viney. I didn't think he would fit in our midfield. I think Parker fits a little bit better because he's got a little bit more versatility. He can
yep,
play forward,
yeah,
he can play in the midfield. I think he obviously brings like a good culture into it. So if we can get Parker, yes, for sure, I'm interested, but I'll see it when I believe it.
yeah. No,
Also, he's got a contract, so we'd have to give up something for him.
yeah, no, I
That
get that.
is, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think I agree that Parker's a much more attractive option because of his flexibility. But I guess with that attractiveness probably comes a higher price to pay. So yeah, there's a lot of. I personally, of all the options that have been thrown up, I think Parker's the one that appeals to me most. But that doesn't mean at all that I think it will happen. What about Jack Darling? A different area of the ground, but another one that's been talked about or rumored. Is that one that you'd look at trying to make happen?
Look, I don't like Jack's anti-vax policy, but I do like his goal kicking policy, which is he's kicked 500 plus goals. So he's nobody's fool, Jack Darling. I think a lot of people look at him and think they don't really rate him very highly, but that's only because he was behind Kennedy in that pecking order there.
Yep.
I mean, Kennedy is a 700 plus goal kicker, so he kind of anybody who's kicked 500 goals at AFL level can play. I guess the question is again, what we said before is if you take someone else's minutes, is that going to be productive for us long term? I think it's one of those ones where you just have to trust the club that they know what they're doing. And if you
Yeah.
do bring him in and he's able to help with the forward line, like a Gunston is at Hawthorn at the moment, he's able to nurture the youngsters coming through. He's able to say, this is, work on them with some craft, hand fighting, leading lanes, leading patterns, all that sort of stuff. I think that'll be really positive. But the reality is that Jack Darling quite clearly is not the future for us. But can he help us in the medium term? Probably.
Yeah. And I think it's more around if he's taking the spot of Teakle or Pink, someone like that, like it's not a big deal, is it? Right? Like they're not players that are in our medium or long-term future either. And he's an established player that's played in a premiership side, as opposed to Teakle and Pink, who, are sort of middle-aged AFL footballers, but have not necessarily been part of successful teams, or successful players in successful teams, probably is more accurate. Um, yeah, it's a challenge. I think personally, I tend to agree with you. I wouldn't mind getting Jack Darling just to replace the kind of maturity that we're losing with Greenwood and Liam Shields coming out. But you've got to look at it from a perspective of if we bring this player in, does it mean we can't play, Charlie Comben, for example? And if that was the case,
Yeah.
I don't think you'd want to bring someone like Jack Darling in.
The other one is Malcolm Rosas from
Yes.
Gold Coast. I like him. I really like him as a player. I think he's not gotten the opportunities up at the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast are an interesting one because they are absolutely brimming with talent. They've got so many academy picks that they've just got to play these guys. They've got obviously last year was a great example of that. They had a unprecedented level of draft capital, so I think Rosas is a little bit on the outer as a result of that, and he's a very skilled, very innovative player. So I think we do definitely need a small, productive forward, a forward that crumbs, a forward that can pop up and kick for a bag of goals, somewhere in that vicinity of 30 to 40 goals a year. That means that it means that the opposition have to put time into them. It's
Yep.
not just zone off and run forward, and I think Rosas would be a good option, and he would probably come cheap. So
Yeah. And
he would fight it out with Robert Hansen Jr. as the small forward for that small forward role.
And I think the fact that he's a little bit more off Broadway is probably makes him a more likely option for us. I mean, who knows what Luke Parker wants to do? I assume that he would prefer to play at the Swans, and get paid well to do so. But you'd have to imagine that if he's going to leave the Swans, like I can't imagine North Melbourne's his first club of preference, for a plethora of reasons. It is what it is. Like if we're going to pay him more than another club, then that's potentially what gets him in. But yeah, anyway, I think Roses is probably a more realistic option for us, even if it doesn't necessarily excite us as much. We're going to mix things up a little bit more and just go completely unrealistic now. So this question's more pie in the sky. So for all of those comment leavers, you can save us the emails. We understand this is not how things work. But if you could pick one player from anywhere in the AFL to be on our list next year, and I guess, potentially fill that hole, or I guess you tell me, like, who's the player that you go, great, let's grab them from next year onwards to make us a better side?
Look, this is a really controversial one, and he's a guy that I don't necessarily like. And people are going to have a laugh at this, and that is Jason Horne-Francis. I want him back at the club right now. I think he's going to be great for our culture. I think that he has gotten over his ice bath phobia, and he's just ready to go. No, quite seriously, Jason's actually playing really well. Well done to you, Jason. I don't hate you as much as other people do. Look, I've got 5 names here, pie in the
Okay.
sky, right? These are just, I mean, if we could can we pay Bont or Cripps $2 million a year?
I'm sure we could. We could make that happen for now. We're not
Surely
paying our
that's
stars too much
enough
yet.
room in the cap. Yeah. Who's getting like the Polek contractors off the books? We can pay Bont, $2 million a year. That I'd love Bont and
Yep.
Cripps because of the leadership. They're we don't have a player at the moment that put the team on his back player.
Hmm. Hmm.
We don't have that person at the moment, and I would love to have that person. And I feel like Cripps and Bond just do it the best out of all of the players. It didn't happen on the weekend in the first round of finals, but they have that ability. Bond's done it so many times. Cripps, when they were going terribly, was getting 35 touches a week and almost winning the game. So those two guys for sure. From a structural perspective, obviously Hogan and Curnow are the two that jump out at you. Like, it's crazy to me that Hogan, I don't know, he would be on, I think he'd probably be on $700,000 a year. And he's the best forward in the competition, which is
Yep.
crazy. He would be fantastic. And Curnow obviously is Curnow. So he's probably the most talented player in the competition. So, and the final one is, this is just a one for me personally. I don't know why. Have you noticed how whenever we play West Coast, Jeremy McGovern
Hmm.
kills us
Yeah, I have. Yep.
every single time? I reckon I don't know how many Brownlow votes he's accrued against us over the journey, but I'd love Jeremy McGovern. I love the way he plays. I love the fact that he's looks like he's just stepped out of the pub and done no preseason and then gets 20 marks.
Yeah, he looks
I
like a
just love
really,
that.
really, really, really good like local level footballer, like in terms of the way that he looks.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we get smashed by any player that can read the footy pretty well because we kick it so poorly inside 50. I think he feasts on that kind of stuff because he knows how to read the ball a lot better than most of our team. Unfortunately, it's like we're setting the plays up for him. Okay, so you've definitely gone for that mature player that's gonna lead us for the medium term, I guess. Like none of them are on the way out. Well, McGovern maybe, but none of them are on the way out in the next couple of years. They've still got some good footy ahead of them in the next 2, 3, 4 years. I went a little bit different. I thought, who was a really young player that is coming through now, and so therefore that we'd have a long theoretical bit of success. So I mean, look, I love Tom Green from GWS. He doesn't fit a need. So for me personally, if I was going to pick a midfielder, I'd pick him. But we've got midfielders. That being said, he's a big midfielder, and I'd love one of them. And you've named two of the best in Cripps and Bontempelli. I think I'd probably have to go either Sam Darcy or Josh Tracy because they're that young key forward that you can put next to Larkin. And you're not actually thinking to yourself they're a foil. Like they're both super dangerous tall forwards. Sam Darcy can absolutely play in the ruck as well. Like Teakle's been doing that, but you're sort of giving up the ruck when Teakle goes into it. Yeah, I think from a marketing perspective and from a sort out the tall forwards, I just love a genuine star. And like we mentioned, they're virtually impossible to find. So if I could just grab them, like let's do it. Let's grab a key forward and fill our boots.
Sam Darcy might be the best shout, actually. I didn't even think about Sam Darcy. Sam Darcy's ceiling is ridiculous.
Yeah, he's
Like right
so
now,
athletic for his height, isn't he?
it's incredible. And right now, those young guys, Sheasel, Dacos, etc. Like Dacos obviously is another one, but I think Darcy might even be the best of the lot potentially, just based
Yeah,
on
for
his ceiling.
sure.
His ceiling is incredibly high. So I mean, yeah, he's a great shout for sure.
All right. Well, now that we've completely sorted out our list issues, the Sid Barker's coming up this weekend, actually. So I think we probably, we know that it's going to be Sheasel, Eldew, and Sherry towards the top end. Who do you think might be kind of rounding out that top five? Potentially, those role players that are appreciated by Clarko and the group, or players that are just played the whole season. Who do you think's going to be up there close to the top with those three?
It's a good question. Did you get your Sid Barker invite? Did that come in the mail, mate?
I haven't got it as yet, unfortunately. I assume it's on
Neither
its
have
way
I.
though.
Yeah, I haven't either. So it's a bit. They're leaving it a bit close, unfortunately. But
They are. I have
um,
to assume there's a podcaster table there for all of us podcasters and North Melbourne fans in the media, so to speak, the pseudo media.
does it come with security as well to keep you guys apart, or in case anything goes down? I can do that
Ah,
if they need them to. No, let's get on to the super. So yes, you mentioned the top three. I think that's pretty obvious. Look, X, what a year! I'll just quickly say X, such a. I mean, how good? Such a good player, such a good bloke.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
really
seems
happy
like
for
such
him.
a nice person. Um, anyway, so I've got a few other names here. Powell, obviously. I
Hmm.
think Powell was uber consistent. His numbers were really, really good this year. I think Core will get votes because as that the aforementioned uh, avalanche of ball that comes down there. I think Archer will get some mentions as well. He had a very consistent year. I mean, he only got lit up once, which was by Bobby Hill. That was a tough one to swallow, but apart from that, he was fantastic. And I do think Curtis will go okay. I think Curtis had an improved year. That was about it for me. What about you, mate? Are there any sort of low key guys floating around that
Yeah,
you
I
think will do
think
well?
look, Paul Curtis is a great shout. You mentioned earlier he was second in our goal kicking. I do worry about he does have that tendency to be a little bit undisciplined at times. Like he gives away a lot of free kicks. So I guess I'm not sure how the coaching group sees that, but he's obviously super talented. I think Archer probably for me, I just don't know if he's played enough games in the first half of the year. But his second half was immense. So I definitely think he'll be coming with a bullet. I mean, yeah, Luke McDonald and Jai Simpkin are interesting ones to me because, like you kind of mentioned, particularly McDonald can be a bit of a whipping boy, but clearly they're valued really highly at the club. And I think McDonald last year, I think there was probably a little bit more cause for the criticism that he got. I think this year, by and large, he played his role, which is not to say that he was a star by any stretch, but I think he did what he needed to do and played every game bar one. So, he's going to accumulate some votes. Bailey Scott, I think I mentioned him earlier on, like he got better as the year went on. So again, like we know that he polls well and plays his role. Even Cam Zerha, who I thought was a pretty slow starter to the year, when he plays well, he plays well. It's just that inconsistency across the season, which might let him down. But yeah, it's really hard to find that player, I think, or those two players that are going to be up there. We know Jai had a bit of a up and down year, potentially with the concussions playing a role. I mean, potentially Charlie Comben, to be honest. I know that you talked about him
Yep.
earlier and his defensive just deficiencies or inconsistency, depending on whether how positive you want to be about it. But he certainly came a long way, and will no doubt poll. It's just how well. I think it's going to be a super even count, except for those three that are going to be way out on top.
Yeah, for sure. I hope Simpkin comes good next year. I'm a big Joe Simpkin fan. Obviously, he was knocked out preseason. That was terrible. Um, I still hate. I will and will forever hate Jimmy Webster. After
Yeah,
that, I'll
it was a
continue
dog
to boo
act,
him.
a real
Um,
dog act.
also, I think he had some issues in his personal life. Like I think he broke up with his partner, and it
Yep.
was just a bad year for Joe Simpkin. I can completely see him having a huge preseason and coming out and being, you know, adding to that midfield quartet that we've already got.
All right, Chief. Well, we're nearly to the end of our chat. We've got a couple of quick questions here at the end. I mean, the obvious answer to this one is more wins, but what are you hoping for from next year? Or I guess what as North Melbourne fans should we be hoping for from next season, do you think?
So, like a lot of people, I just want a stress free preseason. That's the first thing. I want all of the I want all of the noise coming out of North saying this X and Y player have had their best preseasons ever,
Hmm.
and that they're flying on the track.
And let's just actually
This
do
is
it,
all
you
these
know?
Yeah, these are all the noises that I like. And no distractions would be great. Like the less news, the better. But I think more broadly, we need to be more competitive in games. Quite clearly, I kind of use percentage as a really good marker for that. If you compare our 2022 to 2023, our percentage was kind of around that 50 mark, and then it bumped up to 70. And that
Hmm.
was an indication that we had improved in terms of our competitiveness. This year, it's gone back down again, sort of 65. So, look, Adam, I would personally like if we started the rebuild, I kind of 2024, I wanted 5 wins and about a percentage of about 75 would have been okay with me. And so as a result, I think it's a bit fail from a win loss and percentage perspective. But next year, look, I think it's 5 to 8 wins, probably higher than that, probably 7 wins would be great, and a percentage of 80.
Okay.
That would be perfect for me.
And when you
Like I
say
know
that's
that's
perfect, is that an
people
expectation or is that what you're hoping for, do you think?
that's an expectation. That
Yeah,
that
okay.
as in I think our natural progression, that's what it should be. I think our results haven't reflected where we're at necessarily in terms of the development this year. Like we should have been at 5, is what I'm saying this year. And
Yeah.
therefore next year we should probably be at 7 and a higher percentage. As we've seen from Hawthorn, like once you get that connection piece and it clicks, you can get on a
Mm.
run of games and we can be really, really competitive. So that's what I hope. I hope we get on that run of games. I hope we win a few in a row and that we start dishing up some good some kind of competitive efforts against some of the better teams in the comp.
I think that it's that classic. We know that progress isn't linear, and so I think we have to hope that we've had this little backward step, and we can bump up. And Clarko's, let's call it third year. It's kind of his second year, but whichever of those you want to pick, you'd hope that we've got enough of those structures in place to see some progress on field next year.
For sure. And look, we want to see more of Dersma, we want to see more of Will Dawson, and we want to see more of Hardiman, and potentially whatever we do in the draft this year. I think I want to see continue to improve our talent levels throughout the team. Like I think we're very top heavy with our talent. Like we've got quite a lot of talent, like high end talent, but we don't have the next level down, and then it
Yeah.
sort of drops away quite quickly. So if we can continue to push those stocks, that'd be fantastic. I fully expect us to go like just the best player in the draft in terms of the best player that we can get. So I think maybe a split pick. I don't know how you feel about that, but this
Yeah,
is what I'm hearing. So maybe a split pick and
I don't profess to know the draft pool well enough at this point. I certainly will, now that the season's over, it's one of my, I guess wishes to be more across it. I listen to Cal Toomey a lot and kind of how he watches the draft as, someone who tends to get it right most years in terms of where players tend to go. I cert, but broadly speaking, it seems as though it's a pretty even draft. And therefore, if you could split the pick, I think that's a good move. It's just whether or not it's finding that partner that is happy to do it. Because, if we're wanting to do that because it's an even draft, then I think finding a team that wants to split their picks could be challenging for the same reasons, if that makes sense. But I definitely think, when you're in that top five, top eight of the draft, you take best available because, it's so the quality at the top just tends to be a lot higher, and you want to grab that quality and then figure it out from there. So that'd be my philosophy as well, I think.
yeah, for sure. You're 100% correct. And you're seeing now, like when with players moving, you are going to get compensation for that. Bailey Smith says he wants to move to Geelong. Like they're going to get a first round draft pick for that or
Yep.
potentially a player. And I know that's not ideal given that you've put some work into them. But yeah, I think you'll eventually, you won't, they won't just go, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. I also think that, Richmond might be a big player. Richmond are going to be a big player in this draft because it's looking like they could have as many as 5 to 6 first round draft picks, given the players that are leaving
Mhm.
that club. And so they could be a willing dance partner in this case.
Yeah, and they're probably the only one that I can think of again without having thought about in detail. They're the ones that potentially you might look and say, look, we'll give you two, and again, it's like whether it's like 6 and 11 or whatever it shakes out to be. I wouldn't be opposed to that so long as we're one of those picks. Like if that number one pick we're taking best available, we're at least looking at that second pick and going, who's a key position-ish type player that might fill a role. But again, like I think there's a lot of if buts and maybes about that because maybe we've got other plans that as fans we're not too sure about. It's always hard to play the list manager when you don't know what the actual list managers are wanting to do because you might be on
For
a
sure,
completely different
100%.
path. I
And
guess.
often are, yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, and that's how we end up feeling disappointed. I don't know how you were feeling going into last year's draft, but I was super keen on Nick Watson because I saw him as a player that plays a role that we needed. But he's having a fantastic second part of the year and is obviously playing finals, so good luck to him. But there's every chance that Dersma ends up being a much better player than him. It's just right now you kind of look at it and you go, oh, Watson's looking pretty good, isn't he?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm more in your camp with this one. I think have a think. So think to yourself this, right? What is the best? Who's the best small forward in the competition? Like, and do you want to risk a very high end draft pick on that player? So, how many absolutely gun players are 170 centimeters tall?
Yeah, like not many. Like Brent Harvey was pretty
Not
good,
many,
but
right? He was great in potentially a different era, but right now, like you're looking at Caleb Daniel as all
yeah.
Australian once. You're looking at maybe Darcy Jones from GWS. Like they're good players, but they're not like
How tall is Isaac
they're not.
Rankin? Is he 175?
He's taller. Yeah, he's way taller
Yeah,
than the Wizard. Although the Wizard's playing great at the moment. But my point is that your ceiling is not as high. Your
yeah,
ceiling is not going to be as high for Watson as it's going to be for a Dersma or a Harley Reid or whoever it is, you know.
yep,
So I'm not as worried about that. But don't get me wrong, I love his attitude, as in like he's a fire starter.
yep.
Um, and I kind of like that kind of Papley type player, you know.
Yeah, I think every team, it's the type of player that you hate to play against, but when they're on
Yes,
your side, you love them, and their teammates tend
for
to love
sure.
them too. Um, okay, well, I think that's probably enough chat about the men's side. Are you getting across to AFLW? Is that something that you're hoping to get to as the men's season wraps up? Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, for sure. I really like the women's. I think it's interesting juxtaposition between the women and the men at the moment, and in
Yes.
terms of their relative level of success, I guess their week to week consistency is completely different. The women are. I mean, we've got some incredible players. Really, they really do. You know, Jazzy Garner, Ash Riddell, the Kings. We've picked up a few as well this year.
Yeah, Birch
So
is coming and
it's
playing a
looking,
role, and Jazzy Ferguson down
yeah,
back's phenomenal.
yeah, and it's looking really exciting actually. And I watched the first game obviously against Brisbane, and that just excited me.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I saw a team that played very hard footy, and you know what they played? They played a different style of defense. And if anybody's watching, I think AFLW tends to be quite one on one,
hmm
just the way the ball movement works. As in, you kick forward, and then there's a one on one contest, and then it's another one. What the Kangaroos are doing is playing a little bit more of an assertive brand, which is kind of they're playing this kind of roll up style defense where they're bringing people up at the ball carrier to force the errors, and that was so obvious against Brisbane, and Brisbane
yeah,
couldn't handle that pressure. And they just kept coming and coming and coming with pressure, and Brisbane couldn't handle it. And eventually they wilted, and we kicked 6 or 7 goals or whatever it was in that third quarter. Great start to the year. I half expected us to not do as well this week, based on the fact that we just played in 35-degree heat and
yeah.
80% humidity a week ago. And then we played Geelong, who, look, to be honest, Geelong, pretty good team. Like they were top four last year, so they're pretty decent. But I think we just lowered our colours a little bit, even though we came away with the draw.
Yeah, no, it wasn't our best. There's plenty of different factors in that. I think you're right. The heat from the previous week's not great. The conditions weren't necessarily conducive to that fast paced footy that we were trying to play because we were pretty fumbly at times and lowered our colours is probably a bit kind. I thought we were pretty lucky to get the 2 points in the end. It was one of those sometimes when you draw you win and sometimes when you draw you lose, and I think that was a win for us based on how we were playing in the game, even though coming into the game, you'd say we'd want to win. I mean,
Hmm.
we're still playing some good footy in patches, but there was just a lot of those mistakes that crept in that I think, we certainly didn't see that the previous week against Brisbane. We were dominant against Brisbane. So hopefully this week against Melbourne, it's a similar story to round one, not round two.
Yeah, one thing that kind of gets me about the AFLW draw is it's so uneven because of the amount of games that they play.
Mm,
So it means that we'll probably end up playing like 8 of the top 10 teams.
yeah,
And that we've got to win those games to make the 8. Whereas there are teams who would play, they might play 2 of the top 8 teams.
yeah,
And then they end up making the 8 because of the strength of schedule is so poor. And then we've done it the hard way about playing all these gun teams. I mean, we played Brisbane and then up there at their home ground in ridiculous conditions. And we play against another top 4 team in Geelong the next week. And then we play against Melbourne, who's another good team. So it's pretty brutal.
It is, yeah. And I guess I hope that in time it's something they can sort out in terms of, making it work financially, having a longer season. But I totally get that at the moment, the 10 or 11 week home and away season is kind of all that makes sense. But you're totally right. It does make for a very unfair fixture. At least, in the AFL, we still have an unfair fixture, but at least you're playing everyone once, at least. And then you've got some bonus games. It does make it challenging if, for whatever reason, that the quirks mean that you don't end up playing the bottom 4 or 5 sides. It certainly makes for a very different weighted fixture, I suppose. But yeah, it's tough. It's still, I sort of view the competition as a whole as still a competition that's being built, as opposed to, the AFL, which is still growing, but it's a very established. And I think if you look at it through that lens, you can kind of forgive it a little bit more. But look, it is what it is. We're a good side. We can hopefully just roll with the punches and yeah, hopefully go one better this year than we were able to last year.
Yeah, I think along with the Crows, we're the best two teams in the comp at the moment. I think I'd be disappointed if we didn't make it to the final four, and I would be again disappointed if we didn't make it to the grand final. It would be very, very disappointing, especially how the grand final last year we were right in it, just lost it at the end.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the natural progression. Also, statistically, every team that's played in a grand final the year before ends up winning the next year
Okay. I wasn't
in
across that. Well,
AFLW. So that's
that's
good
one for everyone at home. That's one
for
for
sure.
us that works in our favor, I guess. Because
Yeah.
typically, in my mind was going to
Food
we
for thought.
think it's going to happen, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I'm happy to be more positive about it, based on that new
I'm glass
information.
half full, as I said.
Yes, that's good.
So
That brings me up
we
because
can
I'm
make it.
often not so. But it's hard not to be positive with the way that the women are playing. 'Cause it's exciting. Well, thanks, Chief, for coming onto the podcast. We mentioned it off the top, but I'd be remiss of me not to give you an opportunity to plug your podcast from the outer properly. So give us a pitch. What could people expect if they were tuning in?
Yeah, it's a little bit more lighthearted, mate. Um, we take a little bit of a off Broadway approach to it, and make it a little bit more fun and easygoing. And look, we talk a little bit of footy, but we talk a little bit of life as well. Funny things that happen to us. It's myself and a guy called Ron, who's an Essendon supporter. So we're both wallowing in misery most weeks, which is fun in itself. And our producer Kate is from Britain and has absolutely no idea about AFL. So we're on this journey of kind of educating her as we go along, and it's been fun. And so yeah, listen in if you need something that's a little bit more lighthearted and not so. It's still like a footy podcast. It's in its essence, but we go down a few different random tracks which people might find enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think, the name from the outer, I guess, also speaks to the vibe of the podcast, doesn't it? It's that you're from the outside looking in, it looks as though you're kind of standing or sitting in the outer just talking to a mate about footy. Is that kind of what you're going for?
100%. We're not people that are insiders. We're just people that love the game and kind of observe, and we're trying to like push that fan kind of perspective. We live the day to the week to week kind of routine of getting your hopes up for the weekend and then them being dashed, and then that'll come through at the podcast. I mean, some of them, if you ever get on our Instagram and have a look at some of the reels that we have, particularly with Ron, about some of the Essendon's performances over the journey. Oh, it's despair.
Yeah, yep. And
And
I
that's
guess
funny
that's
sometimes.
what's funny from coming from a fan base that I don't know if we can have despair because our hopes aren't high enough at the moment to have despair. The Bombers have created this hope or this idea that things could go right, and then as you say, it's despair when things invariably the last couple of years haven't gone well at the end of the year, which, I think brings a lot of joy to North Melbourne fans, but not necessarily Essendon supporters.
And look, Schadenfreude is one thing that he brings forward. He hates a lot of teams, and he loves when they do badly. So, these are the enjoyable moments that we have.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a really, really good time, and we've got a few interesting segments. One of which people should give this a go. AFL related movie titles.
Okay.
AFL related movie titles. I'll give you an example here. This is one that describes our first half of the season, and that's Nightmare on Arden Street.
Yep. No, it's absolutely that was a nightmare.
That was a nightmare. So we've got a few really good ones going on. So if anyone wants to write in, send me a DM and we'll read it out on the podcast.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Chief, for sitting down and talking a long time about North Melbourne. We're certainly gone for a long chat, and I've really appreciated it. And yeah, I guess, like you said, if you want to find his show, you can find them on Instagram and on anywhere you can find a podcast. From the Outer, give it a listen. From a fellow North Melbourne fan to another, we're doing some great stuff. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate the opportunity, and go Roos. Hopefully, the next year's a better one.
Go Roos, indeed. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that chat with the Chief. Super appreciative for his time, and yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the different format for the podcast. I know it's usually a solo gig, and so it's a bit of a different feel, but I think it's great to get some different perspectives on the podcast. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that really extended chat, and we'll talk North Melbourne in the coming days. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.